Hey guys, this is Dr. Mike Woo-Ming. Welcome to another edition of Bootstrap MD, the podcast for physician and healthcare entrepreneurs. Really excited to bring upon my next guest. She is the founder of and president of a company you may have heard of called Set for Life Insurance, which emphasizes that GSI or Guaranteed Standard Issue Disability Insurance skips medical underwriting, ensuring guaranteed acceptance regardless of pre-existing conditions like anxiety or back pain, conditions that could really complicate traditional policies. With discounted rates often negotiated by training programs, Jamie is going to highlight how GSI provides hassle-free coverage with strong benefits, like own occupation definitions, without the intrusive exams or delays with standard applications. Since 1993, Set for Life Insurance has guided over, get this guys, 30,000 physicians. And she's going to help us, whether you're early in your career or later in school year, to explore different options, and especially for younger folks who coverage is typically only available during training. She's also going to caution us that high earners might need additional policies due to coverage limits. So we're going to delve right into this, and I'm so excited to have her on the program. Jamie, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
This is great because we usually have a lot of physicians are on the call, but there's always things that are on the back of our mind. And especially when it comes to insurance. I remember when coming out, it was almost like secondary, right? When I was going to go and work for somebody and I just take whatever insurance coverage that they get. And then I don't know, maybe hope for the best, which is probably isn't the most strategic solution. So I guess for starting out, maybe you can talk about your background. What inspired you to start Set for Life Insurance? And why did you choose to focus specifically on doctors?
So I started way back in 1993 in the industry. I grew up in the industry. I never thought I would go into the industry, but I did an internship in college just to test the waters, and I just really enjoyed it. I was at WashU in St. Louis, where they have a big medical center. And so I was referred to a couple of physicians and just got passed around. I moved back to Denver after I graduated in 95. And within 6 months, my mother became very ill. She was needing a double lung transplant, and
Mm,
I was her primary caretaker. And so that really impacted me quite a bit. So I was taking her to the university hospital. And while I was there, I was meeting a lot of the different physicians. And again, I would just get passed around, but it really became a passion of mine because I saw firsthand how important it was to have a policy to sustain her. She was a big corporate executive, and if she didn't have a policy, there's no way she would have been able to maintain her financial life while waiting for a double lung transplant and all that is entailed in that. So things just grew from there. I started writing a lot of people just locally. And then as physicians move all over the place, and within a few years, I was all over the country. I was one of the first people to have a website way back in 2000 when that was really new. And I've just grown and expanded from there.
is it kind of like word of mouth and you're just providing great service for other doctors and they just hear
Yeah, I
about it?
think I've over time, I've just built such a large client base that I get referred around. I have a lot of clients that are in strategic leadership positions all over the country. They refer me to a lot of their new residents when a lot of people get policies. But I also have a lot of people who come to me when they're mid-career, late career, reviewing their things. So I've just developed a reputation over the years online and meeting with clients, and it's just grown from there.
Let's take you back to those 90s again. This is a few years ago. What are some of the early challenges that you faced when working with doctors? What did you see and what solutions did you provide for them?
I think the biggest obstacle when it comes to disability insurance is number one, people just assume they can go get it when they want to. I'll just put this off. I'll get it when I'm done with residency. I'm really busy. I can't deal with this now. And what they don't realize is the longer you wait to get it, one, it becomes more expensive. It's based on your age. And two, you have to be able to qualify for it. So if you wait too long and you have an adverse change in health, that can go against you. It can become really hard. So I think the biggest myth is I can just go get this when I want to. And then I think the other big myth is a lot of people, and even still today, not even just in the 90s, people just assume that their employer is going to take care of them. They're going to go and they're going to work at a place, and their employer is going to provide all of these great benefits. And if anything happens to them, that's going to be adequate. And their employer will always care about them and take care of them, even if they have a claim, even if they get sick or injured. And that is just not necessarily true. So there are a lot of gaps in the coverages that are provided through the group. And The other thing is I think a lot of people back in the 90s probably more so just assumed they'd get one job, they'd stay with it their whole career and everything would be stable. But as especially now, people are very mobile and people get up and leave and move. And so they really need to make sure that their insurance coverage is portable and can go with them, not only if they change jobs, but if they also change careers. It's really important to make sure that they maintain that flexibility.
Yeah, I remember one of I think it was in residency, and I was training with an ENT surgeon. And what was interesting to me is, and he didn't do any surgeries, it was strictly clinical. And I still remember the story, even though it was like 30 years ago. And he was like, Mike, he says, think about disability insurance, and told his story. He was basically on call and he fell asleep on his hand, of all things. And it caused a nerve paralysis, and he wasn't able to yet to practice. Just something randomly occurring, not in an
Mhm.
accident. It just he slept on it incorrectly, and it caused a nerve paralysis. And so that kind of stuff would make the importance
And
of
was that permanent or was
this
that temporary?
permanent. I think there
Oh
are
my
some other
gosh.
circumstances that were involved that we really don't want to go into, but it's still. And he said he was looking for, he was a trained ENT surgeon. That's his bread and his hands are his bread and butter, and he was able to make it work, but he did not have the insurance. So that was a story that always cemented the importance of it. But you're right. When I was in my 20s, thought I was invincible as well, right? We all do to some extent, but you never know until it's
Yeah, and that's a
occurring.
really great example, and it goes to show a couple of things. Number 1, the importance of having an individual contract that has language in it called own occupation. So if he
Yeah,
had a policy that said sickness or injury and he can't work in a specialty, he's gonna get paid. So in that circumstance, had he had that policy, he would have been paid a benefit even if he pivoted and was able to do another medical specialty or another entirely different occupation, he'd still get paid those benefits. And secondarily, if he only had a group policy, they would likely say you have to be totally disabled, not working. So again, let's say he pivoted and said, I'm just going to do general internal medicine or I'm going to do some research. If he was able to earn anything, they're not going to pay him. So you're in this situation where you say, I've trained to do otolaryngology, that's all I want to do. And they say, if you're able to do anything else, we're not going to pay you. So do you just stay and collect benefits and volunteer somewhere? Or it really becomes a problem. And most physicians are really motivated. They want to do something. So if they can't
right.
do that job, they want to be able to do something else, but they don't want to be punished for doing so.
And let's get into it. Can you tell us the difference between the own occupation and I believe it's called any occupation insurance?
Yeah, so own occupation means it says due to sickness or injury, you can't do your specialty or whatever it is that you're doing at the time of claim. So some people buy their policy, they're in medical school. They haven't even declared a specialty. And then later on, they go through some surgical subspecialty. What happens is at the time of claim, if they're sick or injured and they can't work in that subspecialty or whatever they're doing, it's going to pay the benefit even if they can work and do something else. So in that example that you gave, let's say that person decided, okay, fine, I'm just going to teach or I'm going to do some research because I can't do procedures. They're still going to get paid their benefits. Any occupation is what most group policies have. So most group policies are just generic, they cover everybody. So they're going to say, oh, you're capable of doing research, you're capable of teaching, or you're doing that. We're out. We don't have to pay your claim.
Mm.
So maybe when you're doing the teaching or you're doing something else, it may not be as much as you were earning prior. So again, you're in a tough situation. Do you teach part time and barely make anything and lose all your benefits, or do you just sit around and collect your benefits and you can't go out and work? So that's why it's really important to evaluate what you do have. And a lot of times you have to take that group policy. So you're working at a large hospital or a group, you're required to take it, but there's still a gap between what they're going to pay and what you want to take home. So most people supplement with their own policy so they have some own occupation coverage. So that way they can have that. And an individual policy is portable. So like we said, if you ever leave that employer, that's yours to take with you. And if you want to go and do other things in your career, you can expand or adjust the policy accordingly.
That sounds like a common misconception about with except for what we have. What are some other big misconceptions that maybe some incoming doctors do feel should know about disability insurance?
So again, like we mentioned before, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is I can just get this when I want to. And the reality is, when you apply for disability insurance, because it's actually a pretty high risk, about 1 in 4 people will have a claim at some point in their career. They ask a whole host of medical questions, and it can be really difficult to get. So about 1 in 3 applications either is turned down, or they have some kind of rating or exclusion on the policy, meaning you had a pre-existing condition of, let's say, a back problem or a knee problem, or you're taking medication for a psychological issue. All of those things would be excluded. So it can be very difficult to get. Once you have your policy, you can then increase down the road as your income changes, and you don't have to answer any medical questions. So they only have one shot to ask those medical questions. So I think a big misconception is, I'll just put this off, I'll procrastinate. Once I'm settled, once I have a family, once I'm settled into my job, then I'll go out and buy it. It might be really difficult to get.
So someone listening to this program now, maybe they're a doctor, most are doctors, and they're shopping around for disability insurance. They're looking at Set for Life, and maybe they're looking at some other companies. What are some of the red flags that they should watch out for when shopping around?
When you look at different places to buy, there are two different types of people in the industry. There are agents and there are brokers. So an agent actually works for an insurance company, and they have an incentive and motivation to only show you that company. This is the best one, and this is why. Whereas a broker, we're independent brokers, so we don't work for any insurance company. We're able to shop around and represent all of the companies. So when somebody comes to us, we will spreadsheet it and show you all of the available options. So what I might recommend for you might be completely different than somebody with a different profile. Maybe it's a woman and they live in a different state and a different specialty, and they're older or younger, whatever it is. All of those things will impact it. So it's really important to make sure you're having somebody helping you objectively look at the different policies to make sure you're getting appropriate advice. And you're also creating a policy that fits what you're looking for and what your needs are.
Many of my audience are physicians who are pivoting or considering pivoting. Maybe a number of them work for a big healthcare organization, and maybe they're looking to strive it on their own. I focus a lot on private practice, but even maybe that they're going to from a W-2 to a 1099. What are some things that they should be thinking about when it comes to disability insurance?
So when you apply for a policy, you do have to have income verification to justify and be able to get a policy. And so if you know you're going to be going to be a 1099, maybe you're starting your own practice, maybe you're going to pivot, maybe you're going to go do locums, or maybe you're going to start a business, you'd be better off getting a policy while you're still a W-2, because you can just show a pay stub and verify that income. Once you have that policy, and you do leave and you go work elsewhere, the company can't force you to reduce the benefit or anything else. So it's really beneficial to get the policy while you have verifiable income. If you don't do that, let's say you say, you know what, I'm just so busy, I'm starting my own practice, I'm just going to wait. If you go to apply for a policy and you're in the early phases where you don't really have an income stream or verifiable, you sometimes have to wait 1 or 2 years to just show an income pattern. So it can be harder to get insurance at that point. So when you apply, everything's based on where you are at the time of application. But when you go on claim, everything's where you are at the time of claim. So if you're working for a hospital or you're at a practice and you have verifiable income, let's say you go and you buy 10,000 a month benefit. Then subsequently you leave, you start your own practice. Maybe you don't make any money for 2 years, 3 years, because you're just in the early phases. If something happens to you, since you've been paying those premiums, you're going to get 10,000 a month benefit because you're paying those premiums. They can't force you to reduce it. So if you're in the process of pivoting or making changes, that's a really good time to evaluate your insurance. You might already have insurance, but you might need to make some adjustments accordingly as well. So you might have something, but it might be a good time to boost it up, increase those benefits, knowing that you're going to be making a change.
Yeah, Tom offered similar to the same advice. I often tell doctors when they're looking to buy a house, I go, it's a lot easier to buy a house with a W-2 than with 1099. But you've worked
Absolutely,
with,
it's the same
yeah,
thing. And something else that's also interesting too is, if you know you're gonna be going through a big change, let's say you're gonna be pivoting from practicing medicine to doing something else. Maybe you're just gonna do a consulting practice. You're not even practicing medicine. Maybe you're just doing something non-physician related or something else. Then you might want to look at and say, where would it be more beneficial? Where would I get better rates? You might actually have better rates as a consultant or doing something of that because it's considered lower risk than getting it as a physician. If you have your policy and you buy it as a physician, a lot of people are under the misconception that if they go and pivot, now they're doing this consulting work and so they hurt their hands, they say, I can't do medicine. The company is going to look at it and say, but at the time of claim, you weren't practicing medicine. You were doing consulting. So I actually had this happen to somebody. I had a client of mine, he was an anesthesiologist, bought his policy during residency, worked as an anesthesiologist several years. And then he decided he wanted to start a locum business. And so he was the CEO of this big locum practice. And so he was really an executive. He developed some hand, I think carpal tunnel or something like that, and he couldn't go and practice anesthesiology. He was able to work as an executive. There was no loss of income. There's really no loss. And said, I bought the policy when I was a physician on occupation, but the company's going to look at it and say at the time of claim, you hadn't been practicing medicine for years. You're not using your hands. You're using your brain. And so they didn't pay that claim.
Is this and that sounds like a common mistake often. What are some other common mistakes that you see doctors occurring when they're doing insurance planning?
So I think another common mistake is I think people get a policy during residency and then they never look at it again. And I think
Mm,
something that's really important is as you go through your career, anytime there's any kind of life change, it's really important to reevaluate your insurance. So again, especially to your audience where maybe people are only doing medicine part-time or maybe they're pivoting and doing other things. All of those things could impact your need for insurance and maybe what's on your policy. Maybe you should change and say, hey, now I'm doing consulting. Can I get consulting rates? So, not evaluating your policy properly. Or maybe somebody buys a policy, they get 5,000 a month and they never look at it again. 10, 15 years later, they have a claim and they say, I'm only getting 5,000 a month. That's not enough to cover my mortgage. So it's really important as time goes on to evaluate and reevaluate your insurance. And I look at it as there's 3 or 4 phases. There's the early phase during training, during residency, when a lot of people get their policy. Then there's that phase where you're in your higher earning years and you're really working up. Maybe you make partner or maybe like your audience, maybe you pivot and you do some other types of things in your career. That's a good time to evaluate. And then a lot of people also forget or fail to realize later in your career, you might be able to pull back and maybe trim your policy because these policies can be expensive.
mm.
Maybe you're in your 50s and you say, paid off my loans, I've paid off my house, the kids are out of the house. I just need to get to the finish line. I just need to get through the next 5 years. Maybe you could trim the policy. Maybe you don't need as much benefit. Maybe you've accumulated a lot of assets. And so I've got a lot of clients that are now in their 50s and we're reevaluating and trimming the policies, not necessarily dropping the policies yet, because you still want to have the policy so long as you're earning an income and are reliant on it. But I think a lot of people just fail to keep everything up to date.
Now, you mentioned that things have changed, at least since the 90s. Doctors are more mobile. What are you seeing maybe in the physician insurance space now? Maybe we know, or what changes have you seen, perhaps even post pandemic, that you're foreseeing or you're predicting what's going to happen?
So post pandemic, I'm seeing more and more physicians being able to do telemedicine, be able to do pivot and do a lot of other types of medicine, whereas before everything had to be done in person. And so that's something that I think is you want to keep an eye on for disability because maybe you're not able to go into the hospital, you're able to still do some work online or just see patients through telemedicine. So you want to make sure that's still covered. I'm seeing more and more people doing sort of gig work, doing podcasts, doing other types of work that's maybe not even medicine related. A lot of people are doing other types of things to supplement their income. I've also seen personally, and again, it might be anecdotal, I'm seeing a higher level of burnout. I'm seeing a
Mm.
lot of people just saying, oh my God, how can I finish this up? How can I get out of here? How can I do something else besides practicing medicine? We're also seeing a lot more mental health types of claims. I think that may not even be post pandemic, but I think there's been a lot more people with mental health, anxiety, depression. I'm seeing more and more people, ADHD, all of those types of things. I don't know if it's more diagnosed or if it's just more prevalent, but we're seeing a lot more issues related to that as well.
Well, this has been tremendous and really great to see your insight in the 30 plus years you've been working with doctors. Where can they go find out more information about you, your company? Where's the best place to get started?
So the best place to go is just setforlifeinsurance.com. We have our contact information on there. We have request a quote on there. If you currently have insurance and you just want another opinion, you want somebody to just evaluate it, we're happy to do that. You have questions about any kind of coverage or anything, we're happy to talk to people. So yeah,
Yeah.
visit our website, setforlifeinsurance.com.
Okay, great. And we'll also put that in the show notes as well. We'll let her know that the Bootstrap MD and we referred you over to you. We really appreciate it. Jamie, again, it was tremendous. Your insight, your wealth of knowledge into this space. Any last minute thoughts for our guests before we end the call today?
Not that I can think of. I really appreciate you having me on the show and appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
All right, guys, check it out, setforlifeinsurance.com. All right, in Fleischner, again, thank you again. And thank you guys for listening. Again, as an entrepreneur, you're going to have ups and downs in your physician career and life. Remember, just do something small each day. Maybe open up that disability insurance or look at to see what was covered, and that'll keep you get closer to your goals to keep moving forward.